So I just want to say, I was watching Cassie talking to Canada's Minister of Gender Equality. Canada has a Minister of Gender Equality. The USA has Betsy DeVos. Let's take a moment to deeply sigh. Okay. Oh, and as different as our circumstances are, if we see anything in this amazing, amazing day, this was amazing for me. It's what we all have in common. And part of what this emergency has shown throughout the world is the human toll of COVID-19. And that includes universal anxiety and stress, and not just amongst our students. We are all living in it now, and it has intensified existing high levels of stress, anxiety, fear across our own profession. And for so many teachers and staff, the increased workload has come with increased expectations, including those related to how are we going to provide for social emotional support for our students? And we've had to learn it on the fly, and we've had to learn it without being in the same room with our boys and girls. And I'm reminded that it's not just boys and girls. We have one more segment here. Brenda Austin Smith joins us now. She's the president of the Canadian Association of University Teachers. I'm a primary teacher. I taught the little guys, but Brenda reminds us that teaching is a profession from preschool to graduate school. And I want to thank you for being here, Brenda. Your association represents teachers and staff in post-secondary education. And I have one great big old question just to start our last conversation.
Sure.
What does teacher well-being mean in your context? Because you have some unique insight. I understand you've recently conducted a survey of your membership. What are those findings relating to teacher well-being in the middle of this pandemic?
Thank you very much for asking, Lily, and happy World Teachers Day to you from me here in Winnipeg on Treaty 1 territory in the province of Manitoba in Canada. So yes, the CAUT surveyed our members in the wake of what we now all call the Great Pivot, right? The Great Move Online. And of the members who responded to our survey, we found a lot of distressing results and a lot of distressing realities for our members. Just for example, over 1/3 of our members reported that their workloads had increased 10 plus hours a week. The majority of our members reported working more, period, just in a general way. And 84% of the members that we surveyed reported really increasing levels of stress and anxiety related to some of the things that have already been talked about here today. Things like the absence of reliable, safe, dependent care, the absence of resources to fund things like ergonomic furniture and a Wi-Fi signal. So some of those things have interfered with our members' ability to do the jobs that they're so good
at. This is what you've just described. I think we could be any time zone, anywhere in this 24-hour thing that we just are about to complete, and they would have found the exact same thing. So talk a little bit. How about this? There are some things people keep saying, I can't wait to get back to normal. I can't wait to get back to the way things were. I'm talking to more and more of our colleagues who are saying, I don't want to get back to the way things were. There are some things now that we see that we need to change. What would your members say needs to change or needs to stay the same?
I think what members miss is the contact with students and the contact with colleagues, because one of the things that's really important in our sector are the research and service duties that we provide. And research and service have both been impacted by the pandemic. I'd say one of the things that nobody is is mourning or really looking forward to is the return to precarious work. Many of our members are hired on short-term contracts. They're not paid fairly for the work that they do. They lack resources. They often don't have any pension plan or benefits to see them through the pandemic in terms of teacher well-being, mental health, and emotional health supports. So these things are things that we would all like to see changed yesterday.
Right. It really has just shone a light on what we've been saying we need fixed for so long, and not just for our students who are in very different situations, but for our own colleagues and for our own professions. One of the things that I know has really impacted higher education has been the stress and trauma. It like you said, from precarious work, forever we've been saying that this is unacceptable and that people deserve full-time, respectful work. Talk a bit about the stress and trauma that our members, especially in higher education, are feeling right now. I know that in the United States, there are many universities that are under a lot of pressure to open up their doors and pretend like everything's all just fine and we'll go back to the way it is. And many of those have had to close their doors quite quickly as students and faculty became infected and super spreaders were created. Stress, trauma, higher education.
Absolutely. We haven't had as many of those episodes here in Canada because most of our member associations and our members teach at universities and colleges that are, for the most part, not 100% face-to-face. There's a lot of mixed hybrid learning going on. But the stress and trauma is still there because research lives have been disrupted, service lives have been disrupted, and many of our members have deep roots in communities. Communities not only in cities, but in rural areas, in northern communities, where they partner very deeply, like long-standing partnership. And they benefit from those connections, the communities benefit from those connections, and those are severed right now. They're paused. And that really creates a lot of stress and trauma as people's work lives and research lives are disrupted. And I'd say some of the funding difficulties that our sector has endured for many, many decades, we need a stable infusion of funding, a mechanism put in place by a strong federal partner here in Canada, working with the provinces in order to fund our sector so that we don't have the burden of a pandemic falling on the shoulders of the most vulnerable among us, among our instructors, many of whom, as is the case elsewhere, are racialized academics, Indigenous academics, women, and academics with disabilities.
So for just a final question in the few minutes we have, Brenda, I know that I keep mentioning Betsy DeVos, because this has just been, she's had a feeding frenzy of all the bad things that could possibly happen and jumping in to see if she could take advantage of this horrible situation. And a lot of it was for-profit schools. Now, we in the K-12 world thought the world was coming to an end when they started talking about for-profit charter schools and voucher schools several years ago. But for decades, higher education has been dealing with for-profit universities and colleges and trade schools. Are you seeing any movement that is afoot with the for-profit higher education world that's being impacted by this pandemic?
We see some signs of that. It's not as typical in Canada as it would be perhaps for you in the DeVos empire. I think what we see is during the pandemic, very fortunately, and just to pick up the theme of the day, we've seen our associations take the lead by filling that contact gap. In the gap left by the Move Online, we've seen our associations commit to compassionate, energized leadership and representation of a mobilized membership in order to kind of short circuit and make sure that that doesn't happen in our sector here in Canada. So what we've been encouraging our associations to do, and what they have done, is get in there, communicate to their members, maintain that contact, fill the information void, and continue to mobilize online.
Brenda, that I couldn't imagine giving better advice to the members and the leaders and just the community advocates that are on this call. Thank you for hanging in there for so long and for giving us this important voice from higher education.